Destiny of a Savior by Famous Fault. Chapter 15. Searching. The teenage boy stumbled backwards. No, it can't be! Every one of the boy's colleagues looked at him with obvious surprise. Naturally, the boy's reaction on him did not put Yugi in a better light with the other 9. Janus raised an eyebrow. Do you know him, Frankie? The young blonde boy named Frankie shook his head. No, but haven't any of you heard of him? He asked, looking around expectantly at the other 9. The woman with the eye patch shook her head. You know that we receive no news from the outside world. The only contact we have with them is when we receive or send home a prisoner. 2 years ago, he was a teacher at Hogwarts. When it was discovered that he was possessed, the ministry freed him from the spirit, but the parents demanded from him to leave anyway, Frankie explained. It was in the Daily Prophet just a week or so before I came here. Possessed? Janus asked, horrified, before looking at Yugi again. Yugi sighed and put a hand on the puzzle. He did not like to be reminded of the time when Atem had been in the Ministry of Magic and how close it had been to him being destroyed. Not in the classical sense, no matter how the Ministry made it sound, Yugi said, unamused. He's still possessed, the man with the long black hair said, sounding equally amused as Yugi did. That was to say, not at all. Arrow, why don't you tell us all that at once? Janus asked, not pleased with subordinate. Then he turned on Yugi again. Arrow is never wrong. I don't even have to ask you to confirm it. I want to know how in the world you were able to get possessed again. Because I freed him, Yugi said, completely sincere. Clearly this was not something these men could understand. All except Arrow looked absolutely flabbergasted. How do you know this? The Japanese asked Arrow. Cold skill, Arrow said, smiling wryly. The Menders don't fear spirits. What did you do to them? Partner? Yugi asked Atem, hoping the former king had some good advice. I don't know, Yugi. We don't know these people, but they are a bit more attentive than I had hoped they would be. I think we aren't dealing with ordinary wizards and witches here, Atem said, displeased. There is nothing ordinary about anything concerning the person possessing me, Yugi said. That the Dementors fear him was to be expected. Everyone with a raised sense of awareness fears him. So do you. Arrow's wry smile stayed in place. I do indeed feel as if my life is in direct danger. I feel like I need to run and hide. I've never felt anything as dark, and I've felt a lot. The fear of the other 9 was fueled even more by the words of the long-haired man. They trusted his judgment blindly, and his opinion on the short man in front of them did make them fearful. When you get to know him a bit better, that fear vanishes, Yugi said. I feared him too, in the beginning. Not now anymore. He's dark, yes, but he's not evil, as some claim. And listening in on this conversation, I take, Arrow said, concentrating on what he felt from the young man. Yes, Yugi said, and relinquished control to Atem. The man with the raven hair couldn't help himself. He took a few stumbling steps backwards when he felt the unexpectedly smooth change. The others noticed the change too, simply by being attentive. My name is Atem, the former king said, still enjoying the feeling of being able to introduce himself with his name, even after all these years. A name was a far more precious thing than most realized. Should we fear you? Arrow said, showing more courage than he realized himself. Atem shook his head. Not unless you give me a reason to. I will save these students, regardless of what you do. Yes, indeed, Janus said, taking back the leadership. That is why this never happened. We know you're not some madman out for revenge, and you know that we will not stop you. We will, however, pretend to do so. This meeting never happened. None of us speaks a word about it. Atem nodded. He appreciated this turn of events far more than the 10 people there realized. We can, however, not shield you from Dementors, but apparently that is not necessary. Same goes for the prisoners. If they talk, we'll have to act. We have our own lives to think of as well. I would never ask for such a thing. You will never know we were here. Not from the Dementors or the prisoners or anything else, Atem said. And if it would come to the point where you would have to take action against me, simply do so. I have my tricks, and the Ministry knows it. Janus nodded with grim expression. We will have to report back to the Ministry every evening. We will, of course, forget to close the door, he said. Is there anything else you want us to know? This will be the last time we communicate with you, any of us. We simply can't take the risk. I will be fine, Atem assured them. So will Yugi. Then it's settled. Go now. This meeting never occurred, Janus ordered, and made a dismissing gesture with his hand. Thank you, Atem said, and quickly disappeared into the darkened hallway again. The other 10 did not stay around to small talk. They quickly went back through the hallway where they first came from. Atem did, however, not really know where to go and stayed in the spot where he had hidden previous to the encounter. "They accepted you pretty easily," Yugi commented.
They are the guards of Azkaban prison. Let's assume that the general population would have a hard time accepting them too. They're probably used to odd figures. What I want to know is how Arrow could know where we were,"
Atem said.
"He knew far too much for my liking."
"I want to know how 3 people were able to put up a permanent shield against Dementors that craves more power than even Dumbledore possessed," Yugi added.
What strikes me as odd is that Janus is their leader. He does not at all seem like the type,"
Atem mused.
"These people don't answer to the Ministry. They only pretend they do. The Ministry would have chosen the guards more carefully, making sure they would obey them. These people have their own sort of hierarchy, and it turned out completely different from what would have happened anywhere else."
"Perhaps he has been here longest?" Yugi suggested, having little to no experience with hierarchies.
"Perhaps. But still, it seems odd. He appears too weak. Of course, I know appearances can deceive. What also was quite clear was that it was a respectful hierarchy, from both ways. Janus is the boss, no doubt, but the others are completely free to speak their mind and oppose him if they feel it is necessary."
"You're intrigued. You like this, don't you?" Yugi asked.
"Yes, it is rare to see an assembly like this. I do like it. They are far from an army that knows what to do at once as soon as something happens. In fact, they are quite chaotic, but effective once they get going,"
Atem said, looking at the spot where the group had stood.
"I wonder how they ended up here."
"Perhaps we can ask them, once, when all this is over," Yugi said with a smile. "I hope so."
"We'll have to answer their questions too, you know,"
Atem said, smiling himself, looking down the hallway trying to distinguish something in the darkness. He took some hesitant steps further into the hallway, curious as to where it would lead. "I wouldn't mind that. Are you going to walk this path to the end?" Yugi asked, having noticed his darker's curiosity. Yugi himself was curious, but he was doubtful if he would dare to actually walk blindly into such darkness had he been alone.
"Yes. Do you mind?"
Atem asked, taking some more steps. Yugi gave Atem a negative reply and looked around, attentive as Atem, with swift pace, made his way further into the hallway. The darkness became more and more pressing, but the ancient king wasn't bothered by it, having spent more than his fair share of time in darkness himself. Then the hallway started to light up, slowly but sure. The source of light was, however, not bright and warm, but cold and grey. It did not take long before the hallway had turned into an actual cave, and when the ruthless waves reached all the way to where Atem was standing, he stopped walking. Clearly the hallway led to the island. To the right of the cave, the walls of Azkaban towered up. It was in one of the short moments that the water withdrew that in the weak morning sun, unable to break through the clouds, Atem saw what the place was. His eyes widened in shock and disbelief. Yugi's reaction was much the same. "No!" he called out when he saw what the place was. Atem took some more steps forward, seemingly unable to help himself.
"This is awful,"
he whispered, and it was only because Yugi heard the thought in their mind, rather than because it was said, that he actually caught the phrase. The sound of the waves was deafening, and it were also the waves that were the cause of the gruesome sight in front of them. Covering the muddy ground were dozens and dozens of skeletons in various states of decomposition. Some looked centuries old, while others seemed to have been thrown there less than a week ago. The way pieces of bones were sticking out of the ground and the mud on the skeletons laid bare indicated that before the storm they had been buried. It was almost as if the sea was pained by the scene. Again and again the waves disrupted it, as if it wanted to tear it away, like a child hitting at a wasp. The only effect it had, however, was that the place looked more like a battlefield than a graveyard. "Please, Atem, can we leave?" Yugi asked, who was much less spellbound by the sight than the spirit was.
"Yes, of course,"
Atem answered quickly and turned around at once, retrieving back to the cave as fast as he dared without being able to see where he was going. So this was Azkaban. Guards only loyal to each other, hundreds of Dementors, and a ripped and torn graveyard. He had not even seen the prisoners yet, and already the place was making him sick. This was the kind of cruelty he had fought so hard to dispel from his country like his father had before him, and here, 5,000 years later, it still lived on. "Britain?" he asked, incredulous. Now why would they be there? You've had so much time to track them down, and the best thing you can come up with is Britain!
Yes, sir, they traveled to Britain the same day you asked us to find them, and it seems they disappeared after landing, the frightened man in the black suit said.
It's not good enough! No one who simply disappears!
He yelled angrily. Calm down, Mokuba, Leon said, putting a hand on the shoulder of his friend. You have to admit that if there is anyone who knows the art of disappearing, it is the person you are looking for.
Amazing, isn't it?
Mokuba bit angrily.
It should be him of all people that cannot get away with not being seen. He's so easily recognized. Same goes for his friend. So why can't they be found? He should have done something after landing, checked into a hotel, or he should have a place to stay. Something, anything.
I'm sorry, sir, they vanished. They landed, went through custom, took a cab somewhere to central London, and vanished. They never left Britain, though. They should still be there. The man said, still sounding a tad scared.
Well, Britain has a lot of people,
Mokuba stated.
We will never find them, having only London to go on.
Why do you need to find them so badly? Leon asked. Had Mokuba tried to find them earlier, he would have understood. But why now, all of a sudden? Mokuba had simply come storming in one morning and demanded of someone to track Yugimoto down. Nobody had questioned them. They had simply obeyed.
What they had not expected was to end up with a dead track. It was no art in today's modern society to find people. In fact, the advanced technology made it almost child play as long as one had access to the right documents. For Kaiba Corporation, that was no art either. Getting access to the airfields database was not a problem for them. Finding Yugi in those endless lists of passengers had not been any work either. Finding Ryo's name on that very same flight had startled Mokuba, but also somehow confirmed that something was going on. A one-way flight to Britain, arriving there in the middle of the night. One of the employees had actually flown over to the island to see where they had gone from there. One of the cab drivers had recognized them. He had driven them to the center of London. He had found it a very odd place to drop someone off, but he had not asked any questions. They had checked the hotels in the area and asked more cab drivers, but they found nothing. The track was dead. Mokuba was slowly going insane. In the dead of the night, a ghostly blue-eyed white dragon had appeared together with a peasant girl, telling him that he was needed. Sometimes he thought he had been dreaming, but it was all too weird. He should have gone to see Yugi when he had reopened the Kami game shop, but he had been in Scandinavia and had no time to spare. Now he could beat himself up for not having daytime. He was in Britain Christmas almost 2 years ago. That summer, he finally returns to Japan, and now he and Ryobako are suddenly leave for Britain again. There is something on that island, and I want to know what it is.
Perhaps he just started a new life there, Leon suggested, trying to calm his friend.
They left in a hurry. You can't deny that. Nobody leaves a note saying they'll be gone for an undecided amount of time if the journey was planned. And had he started a new life, we should be able to find something. We have more insight in what people do than the police.
Mokuba said, breathing deeply, knowing that losing his temper in the way his brother used to do had no effect whatsoever.
It was undeniably true. Yugi and Ryo's disappearance from the face of the technological world was simply strange. Had they flown to the Amazons and disappeared for a couple of months, it would have been understandable. But they were in Britain, of all countries. Mokuba's worst fear was that something had happened to them, something bad. Eventually, when his employees had become so close to falling over from stress under Mokuba's constant demands of news, Leon had interfered. With his employees best in mind, he had banished Mokuba from the office for 2 weeks and told him to get a grip. Now, 2 weeks later, when Mokuba was allowed to enter the office again and asked as to how far they had gotten, the answer he had received was London, in Britain. The trail was officially dead. Mokuba wasn't actually angry with those he had tasked with finding the two friends. He knew that they had done their best, more probably, but the disappointment was hard to deal with. He had truly hoped that one of the two, namely Yugi, was in on some answers. Typical that it was right when he needed them that they chose to vanish. And Mokuba was worried. In fact, he suspected that their sudden disappearance had made that they were rotting on the bottom of a lake or something else in that style. Mokuba sighed and sat down in one of the ugly blue plastic chairs. Leon patted him on the shoulder.
I'm sorry, Mokuba, he said softly. Perhaps you should have done it earlier.
I know I should have done it earlier, Mokuba said, sounding deflated. But still, why did they disappear? Did they run from someone? Or was it something they needed to do? I want to know. Yugi isn't really the kind to simply lock the doors and leave. He must have had reason.
Mokuba,
Leon said, not sure how to put it without hurting his friend.
it's been years, many years since you saw either Rio or Yugi. He could have changed.
Not something that fundamental,
Mokuba said, making fists and shaking his head. He refused to believe that what Leon said was true.
Yes, of course, Yugi had changed, just like he himself had. They all had. But there were things that couldn't change, that had no right to change. And Rebecca?
He asked, having ordered a search for her too, since she had been with him when he had first surfaced. He hoped that they had had more luck with that. After her grandfather died, a man named Raphael became her guardian. I'm sorry, sir, we didn't know. We just recently found out that Rebecca died a year ago, around the same time Yugi returned from Britain. The man in the dark suit said, although not sounding afraid anymore. He sounded sincerely sorry.
Mokuba's eyes went wide as he slowly straightened his back. She's dead?
Yes, though oddly enough, a cause of death was never found. Yugi was present at her funeral, then returned to Japan. He said, we can track the moves he's made at a certain degree, but it's always with long lapses of time. Between Christmas and Rebecca's funeral, there is no record of him whatsoever. He shows up and disappears, seemingly at random.
And Raphael?
Mokuba asked, praying it would not be the Raphael he had in mind. That would make the entire business simply cruel. The man in the suit handed him a picture, and Mokuba sighed, yet again. Why did everyone but him know?
Have you been able to track him down?
Mokuba asked, knowing he was grasping at straws. Yes, he lives in
Britain,
Mokuba said, not even needing to ask. The man simply nodded, refraining from asking stupid questions. Yes, he lives in some shabby area in a London suburb. The last thing he's done, as far as we're concerned, is adopting an infant.
What?
Mokuba asked, incredulous. That was not really the thing he had expected to hear. Naturally, he didn't actually know Raphael, as the major part of time they had spent together, Raphael had been soulless, but it was not an image he could connect with the muscular blonde. Yes, he claims he found a child on his doorstep and took contact with the authorities. A little while later, he adopted the child. The child is blind as a result of a drinking mother, but otherwise perfectly healthy. The man said, more to convince his boss that it was true than to provide him with information.
Raphael, somewhere in a suburb in Britain, adopted a blind infant,
Mokuba repeated, unable to comprehend the information.
Rebecca is dead with no plausible cause. Rio and Yugi are gone from the face of the world. Everyone else is dead too. Why am I the only one not included in this?
He asked, no one in particular. Do you want to be involved in this at all? Leon asked with a frown. He knew about the accident in the tomb, but seeing as how Mokuba reacted, a little more was playing. Considering that little more playing had caused for so much death, he was not sure that he would sleep sound if his friend were to enter that little more. Mokuba turned to face Leon with an expression that showed that he had expected the question and thought it through.
Truth be told, I don't really have a choice.
What does that mean? Leon asked with a frown. Mokuba made odd remarks often, but was never willing to develop them, as if he was hiding something. Mokuba turned to the man in the black suit.
Give me Raphael's address. I might just as well start somewhere.
Then he turned to Leon.
We should talk. I think you deserve a real answer.
That was not really what Leon had expected to hear from his friend. He did, however, follow his raven-haired friend quickly and curiously, but most importantly, worried. It sounded to him as if as soon as Mokuba had the address, he would take the first plane to Britain to find the two duelists. Mokuba, although not actually having any important kind of job anymore, was still considered a someone of high status in Kaiba Corporation. He supposed that he would always be Seto Kaiba's little brother. Even though he was merely responsible for the design of the Kaiba lands in process, he still was held in the same esteem as Leon, and had an office fitting for it. He sat down in the chair behind his desk, and looked at his friend with his hair drawn back in a ponytail. Then Mokuba smiled.
I've never actually thought about it. But you were the last one.
Last one? Leon repeated, not understanding at all.
The last one they ever faced like one.
Mokuba sighed, stood up and conjured a bottle of beer from a refrigerator in his office. Beer was the only sort of alcohol he ever drank outside business meetings, and only when he thought he deserved one. Right now he did perhaps not think that he deserved one, but that he could permit himself one.
He was not quite sure where his fascination with a clean lifestyle came from. It probably had something to do with Leon's influence. He offered his friend one, but like always, the boy with the purple hair declined. Sometimes Mokuba joked with Leon and asked him when he would become a vegetarian, too. Leon was never really offended by the jokes, though he never bothered to answer them, either. He usually just shrugged, as if it was beneath him to react on such a question. "I don't understand," Leon confessed with a frown. "Don't worry, nobody does," the raven-haired boy said and took a sip. "But I might be able to change that. You're my best friend. I should be able to trust you with this. It's not like you've never seen him before." Leon did not react. He just patiently waited for his highly agitated friend to continue. "The person you faced in the finals of the Great Championship wasn't Yugimoto," Mokuba stated bluntly and took another larger sip from the bottle. "What?" Leon called out, not pleased at all with Mokuba's statement. "No," Mokuba said, pretty much indifferent. "You faced a Tem." Leon, who had gotten over the worst shock pretty quickly, had an expression on his face that clearly indicated that he did not know what to say, do, or believe anymore. "Who?" he asked, although having heard quite clearly. "Pharaoh Atem," Mokuba said with a smile, knowing it would only confuse Leon more. "Yugi's alter ego." "Pharaoh? Pharaoh?" Leon joked. "Alter ego?" "Yes. The puzzle around Yugi's neck contained a soul, a spirit. The spirit of an ancient king, a former ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt, the spirit of a pharaoh. An amnesiac pharaoh at that. We retrieved his memories and tried to help him to the afterlife. That is why we were in the tomb in the first place," Mokuba explained with a sad smile. He knew Leon would not believe him, at least not at once. "You were telling me I dueled the spirit of a dead pharaoh in Yugimoto's puzzle?" Leon asked, sounding appropriately skeptical. "Mokuba, do you expect me to believe that?" "You ought to," Mokuba said. "That spirit was the cause of all the drama concerning Battle City, and indirectly also the cause of the tsunami and monster sightings a couple of years ago. He was powerful. So were his enemies. Dark and powerful. And now they are all gone." "I don't understand," Leon said. "Even if this all was true. Why?" Leon was beyond words. "It is true, Leon. I can't prove it, other than to make you remember the difference between Yugimoto and the person you faced in the final," Mokuba said. "It took a very long time for me to accept it, but there in that tomb, they were separated. Pharaoh Atem and Yugimoto faced each other in what was called a ceremonial battle. Two wildly different people." "That simply can't be," Leon stuttered. Mokuba ignored him. "If Yugi were to win the battle, Atem could move on to the afterlife. It was a conflict for most people present. Atem was their friend, but he belonged in the realm of the dead. Yugi won. They were saying their goodbyes when all hell broke loose. The only thing I recall from that time is a flash of green, Teo falling to the ground, grabbing a person standing next to me, and running towards the exit as the tomb was collapsing all around us." Leon listened wide-eyes. Everybody knew that great tragedy had struck Mokuba in that tomb, but nobody had ever heard him talk about it before, not even Leon, who had become the person closest to Mokuba after his brother's death. "When I got out, I saw Ryo standing next to me, simply staring down the opening he had not yet realized. When I looked around, it was just the two of us, and I realized that not one of the people that had been down there would ever see the surface again. And among those people was Seto. Then Yugi more crawled than ran out of the tomb. He and Ryo were equally shocked, both unable to react. For a little moment when Yugi exited, I hoped the rest would too, but they never did. Eventually I called for help. When I asked Yugi if he wanted to go home with me and Ryo or stay, he said he wanted to stay. And that was the last time I saw Yugimoto. What happened to his hem, I don't know." Leon sat quiet. "Nobody would believe that. What did you tell the paramedics? Police? All that?" "A few swift lies," Mokuba smiled. "That still does not explain why you need to find him so suddenly," Leon said, trying to get his head wrapped around the things he had just heard. Mokuba sighed, draining the remainder of his beer. "I saw something. An apparition. She told me that they would need me too. For some reason, she was accompanied by the Blue Eyes. I know it sounds insane, but it's true." "And that is why you were so desperate to find the two of them?" "Yes. She said she'd lead the way, but I don't want to wait for her. I've got to find him. It's not the first time something like that happened." Last time I saw it, it was the Dark Magician, but different. He greeted the ephemeral with familiarity. I need to ask him what it means, and of course, where he disappeared to, and why. I know it sounds crazy, but... I don't think it sounds crazy, Leon said, interrupting Mokuba. I might not believe it, but it does not sound crazy. That confused Mokuba. What? Believing, not believing, it's all relative. But if it is what you believe, I don't think it sounds crazy, Leon said, just as Roland came in. Mokuba looked full expectation at the man who had been working for Kaiba Corporation for as long as Mokuba could remember.
I found the address.
Leon turned to Mokuba. Are you going to Britain? Mokuba looked closely at Leon for a couple of seconds. Yes, tomorrow morning I'll take the first flight. Raphael had expected it to be hard to take care of a blind infant. Certainly it wasn't easy, but not half as hard as he thought it would be. Perhaps it was because he did not have anything else on his hands. No job, no friends, nothing whatsoever but the child himself. Joe, as he was now officially known as, was the only distraction in Raphael's life. Joe, and of course his worrying about the odd pair sharing the same body. Had he not had Joe, he would probably have gone insane by worry already. In a relatively short period of time, Raphael had grown strangely attached to the infant. Joe was his distraction, a chain to the real world. Perhaps it was the constant attention that made taking care of Joe such an easy task. Amazingly, the child demanded more creativity than most other parents needed. It was incredible how much of infant toys were based on visualization. Never in his life had he expected to do so much loud reading. For a while, he read Joe child stories, but he soon became so bored with them, he himself, that he decided to simply read Joe books Raphael found interesting too. The consequence was that the first word Joe ever spoke was literature. When Raphael first heard Joey say it, he had choked on his coffee, believing he had heard wrong. But less than a couple of minutes later, the child repeated the word. It was far from correctly pronounced, but it was unmistakable. Raphael's first reaction was astonishment. Then he started to laugh.
It's probably a good thing Yugi didn't hear that,
he told Joe.
He would have been sincerely concerned.
Instead, he played some music, classical.
Wouldn't want you to learn any more advanced words, Raphael joked. People would worry. What will they say at social services when they hear that is your first word?
Joe laughed out loud and simply squealed, "Warita!" in the happiest voice he could manage.
Exactly.
Raphael sighed and stroked him over the head gently. That was when, for the first time since Yugi and Atem had shown up, the doorbell rang without Raphael expecting anyone. He frowned as Joe, like always, tried to mimic the sound of the bell. Raphael quickly put Joe in his playpen and cautiously went to open the door. His experience with unexpected visitors was unique, to say the least. He opened the door just a little bit to be met with the sight of a boy, hardly older than 20, with long raven hair, gray eyes, and simple clothes. He looked vaguely familiar. Raphael carefully opened the door further. "Raphael?" the boy asked.
Who's asking?
Raphael asked suspiciously. "Mokuba Kaiba," the boy said, and Raphael did not question him once. He might not have paid any attention to Mokuba Kaiba at all. The Kaibas had been Alistar's area, but the face in front of him was nonetheless unmistakably Mokuba's.
Come in,
Raphael said.
I should have expected you.